Today I want to talk about Richard Rorty, and specifically his book, Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Richard Rorty is categorized as a postmodern neopragmatic philosopher. He was a university professor. He was a public intellectual. He passed away very recently in 2007. He was influenced by many different philosophers such as Heidegger, Wittgenstein, Davidson, Nietzsche, John Rawls, etc., etc. Rorty uses all those influences to build his philosophy in his book, and so I'm going to be starting a series about this book here and going through the different things that Rorty argues for and why he's arguing for them and the philosophy that he is presenting. And I'm very excited for this because I have absolutely loved this book and it's something that I want to share and I want others to know about. So I'm looking forward to doing the series on this book. And so today I'm going to be starting with the introduction of Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity. Let's get into it. The introduction to this book, Rorty presents this idea that he wants there to be a liberal utopia. And a liberal utopia, for Rorty, is a society that seeks to alleviate human suffering, human humiliation, and human cruelty. And Rorty wants this society to be made up of people that he calls liberal ironists. And so by liberal, he means people who view human suffering as the worst thing possible. And then ironist is somebody who is focused on self-creation and creating themselves how they want to be. And so in the introduction, Rorty talks about how there is no way to create a theory that synthesizes the private and the public sphere. And so what that means is there's philosophers that focus on the public sphere, which is how do we create a better society? How do we create collective goals and achieve those? And then there are philosophers who talk just about the private sphere of how can you create yourself? How can you become a better person? And there's really no theory that can synthesize the two, because if you're only focusing on yourself, then you're doing the private sphere and you're not influencing or taking into consideration the public sphere. And if you're focused on the public sphere, even just a little bit, you're not fully in the private sphere. And so there's no way to create a comprehensive theory to combine these two. But Rorty wants to say that there's no need to combine the private and public sphere because they both are incredibly useful, and that's all that matters. And so he compares this to a paintbrush and a crowbar. He says there's no need to create a theory to synthesize why we use both paintbrushes and crowbars. He says paintbrushes have their own uses and crowbars have their own uses, and we can use both of them. We don't need to create a theory to justify using both of them or try to synthesize them together. So Rorty raises the point that people might ask the question, why not be cruel? And Rorty says that there's really no answer to this moral problem. And he gives a few counterexamples of how there are no answers to other moral problems in the same way that there is no answer to this moral problem. And so here I have a quote from the book where he talks about, he says, how do you decide when to struggle against injustice and when to devote yourself to private projects of self-creation? Another question would be, is it right to deliver in innocents over to be tortured to save the lives of M times N other innocents? If so, what are the correct values of N and M? Or the question, when may one favor members of one's family or one's community over other randomly chosen human beings? Then he goes on to say, anybody who thinks that there are well-grounded theoretical answers to this sort of question, algorithms for resolving moral dilemmas of this sort, is still in his heart a theologian or a metaphysician. And so Rorty says that there's just not answers to these questions, and we need to move past this idea of trying to build theories around morality. So then the question becomes, well, if we're not going to build a theory around morality, then what is morality going to look like? How are we going to justify? How are we going to progress? What is that going to look like? And interestingly enough, Rorty says we should focus on art and literature and TV shows and movies. And he says that these have already replaced the sermon or the religious text, but society just hasn't really recognized that just yet. And he says that these things can cause moral progress, and these things can really justify our sense of human solidarity and why we care about not harming others. So let me try to give an example of that. Let's say you're watching a movie about the Holocaust, and it is just a deeply graphic movie. You're watching this and you feel the pain and the suffering that the people are experiencing in this movie. And let's say that there's language in the movie that says, you're my brother, you're my son, and just these very familiar terms that help you to relate and empathize with these people who are experiencing pain. And you just intuitively feel that you don't want them to go through that. You feel the pain. You start to view them as one of us instead of them, right? And so that's kind of the issue that Rorty brings up, is that a lot of times with human suffering or not caring about the other is because you view the other as them and not one of us. And so Rorty wants to break that divide between them and us through art and literature, and showing that every single human being is a fellow sufferer, and we intuitively want to stop that suffering when we really start to read books about suffering and watching movies about suffering. We feel empathetic, and there's no theory to justify that. It's just something that we feel. It's something that we have through this empathetic nature. So this reminded me of something that Sam Harris talked about, and Sam Harris talked about the trolley dilemma and the fat man on the bridge dilemma. Essentially what that is people were asked the trolley dilemma, and the trolley dilemma is, let's say that there's a trolley out of control going down the tracks, and it's about to kill 5 people, and you have a lever in your hand, and you can pull that lever, and it's going to adjust the tracks, and the trolley is going to go on a different track where it kills just 1 person. Now, the people who answered, what would you do? Would you pull the lever, or would you let it kill the 5 people? They answered and said they would pull the lever and let the 1 person die, because they morally justified that by saying, well, I'm saving 5 people and one's dying, instead of killing 5 and saving 1. The people were then asked a similar question where, let's say that there's a fat man on a bridge and you're standing next to this fat man. Let's say this fat man is so fat that you can push him off the bridge in front of the trolley, and he will stop the trolley, but then he will ultimately die. And you can't jump in front of the trolley because you are not big enough and you won't stop the trolley. Interestingly enough, people in this scenario said they would not push the fat man off of the trolley in order to stop the trolley. And so here you have a situation where it seems to be the same moral outcome, right? 1 person dying to save 5. But the process of it is different. The people who were pushing somebody off of a bridge, and they were able to feel the moral responsibility for that, and able to see the pain and maybe the face of the person that they're pushing off. It was different, and I think that has something significant to say about the world and how we interact with people. I think that this is very similar to what Rorty's trying to argue, is that when we see the moral implications of our actions, when we really start to view people as one of us and a fellow sufferer, we will want to alleviate that human suffering. And so Rorty argues that there's no philosophical theory that we can build around that. I'll talk about it later on, but Rorty views words like objective and subjective and relativism as just completely irrelevant to the goal that he's trying to accomplish. So now I want to talk about Richard Rorty's definition of ironist. And this is heavily influenced by Nietzsche, because Nietzsche, the overman, is all about creating yourself, becoming autonomous from other people, not being enslaved by the judgments or the descriptions of other people, but being autonomous, being able to create yourself, describe yourself how you want to be described. And so this liberal utopia that Richard Rorty is advocating for is one in which people in the public sphere seek to alleviate all human suffering, human humiliation, human cruelty. And then in the private sphere, people are autonomous. They just seek to create themselves and be who they want to be without harming others. So that pretty much sums up the introduction to Richard Rorty's book here. He wants a liberal utopia filled with liberal ironists. So I'm going to go through and continue this series and talk about the chapters where Rorty continues to build and defend all of these different viewpoints. And it's probably going to sound really strange to a lot of people because postmodernism is a move past Enlightenment rationalism. And so just the very idea of Rorty saying we do not need a theory of morality, we do not need a foundational justification for our morals, is going to be something that a lot of people are going to reject on the surface. But I hope with this book I can help better present what Rorty is exactly talking about. If you're interested in this, leave any comments, leave your thoughts, leave any critiques of Rorty's ideas. And I thank you for the love and support that you've given me so far. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, stick around for more videos, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.